Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here and welcome to my review of Doctor Who Season 15 Story 6, The Invasion of Time. The story that will determine the fate of Season 15 in my opinion. So, is Season 15 redeemed or has it crash landed? It's redeemed. But how good is the story? Well, it's good for me. But it's a bit long. It's too long. It's 6 parts. It's a bit too long. It drags. There's quite a few dull, boring bits, but the story itself is pretty good. It's also a very Stephen Moffat plot in the fact that it's absolutely complicated and convoluted in almost every single detail, up to the end, up to part 4, and then even after that, there's some convoluted stuff afterwards. The plot basically is the Doctor has a plan to stop some Vardans from taking control of time and space by pretending to forge an alliance with them and take over Gallifrey by becoming the president. But by doing this, he is able to get rid of the Vardans, and it also sends people out to the wasteland with Leela, who she doesn't know of the plan, to help form a resistance, and gets K9 to destroy the transaction barriers, and also for the Vardans to arrive, and these other shields to let them materialise properly. However, in doing so, stopping the Vardans, he accidentally lets in some Sontarans who, this has been their plan all along, to invade Gallifrey, and they attempt to take over, but the Doctor is able to destroy them with a DMAT gun and prevent further Sontaran invasion on Gallifrey, and loses his memory a little bit in the process. Whoops. So, Invasion of Time. Yeah, like I said, it's good. But it's very convoluted, very Stephen Moffat-y. Even though Stephen Moffat didn't write this story, he wouldn't write any Doctor Who story until 1999 for Curse of the Fatal Death, and then 2005 with The Empty Child, and also a short story. Don't know if he wrote any other any expanded media stories before that, like Russell T Davies did with the novel Damaged Goods, but certainly prior to 1999, this Stephen Moffat did not write for Doctor Who, so this is not a Stephen Moffat script. It is, in fact, a David Angu script, which is basically a pseudonym given to producer Graham Williams and his script editor at the time. In this case, it's Anthony Reid, and in the second use of this name being used, it's Douglas Adams and also writer David Fisher. In that case is City of Death, of course. So, how does Williams and Reid handle this story? Well, they handled it well, as I mentioned, but as I mentioned, it's very convoluted, very complicated. Characters are just doing things, and you're just, I'm sitting there just thinking, what is going on? Especially with the Doctor, what is his plan? It'd be interesting to know. He does tell Barusa at one point, and we don't see him basically giving him all the details, but we do see him. Barusa understanding the plot and even taking in some involvement, but whether he knew of this plan in the first place or not, or if it was just when the Doctor told him in that moment, I'm not sure, because in part 2, at the end of part 1, the Doctor is attacked by the Matrix in the Crown, and Leela has to come in and try and get it off for him at the start of part 2, and then a short while later, they're taking the Doctor upstairs to be looked after, and Leela's protesting that she didn't kill. She saved him, not attacked him, and Bruce is like the tribunal declared that. And then later at the scene where they actually do talk about it, he says Leela tried to attack him. So I'm not sure. Are they just trying to move the blame onto her, or is Bruce a part of this plan so he can help get Leela out into the wasteland? I'm not sure, especially as there was witnesses to the event. So yeah. That doesn't quite make sense, and because of all this confusion, but not delay, wink. But because of all this confusion, there's a little revolt also starts to happen around the midway point as well, when the Doctor brings in the Vardans, led by Andred, who'd been previously loyal to the Doctor and also had a sort of kindness with Leela. But I'll get back to that a bit later on. And he tries to lead a revolt with some rebel Time Lords that hadn't been thrown out to the city. And then the Doctor basically sort of explains that he's trying to get rid of the Vardans, I guess, and Andrew's on his side. Meanwhile, his associates are murdered by the Castellans men. And the Castellans said only killed him if necessary. And what do they do when they get there? They killed him on sight. If those guards belonged to me, if I was in charge of them, I would sack them on the spot for disobeying orders. If those were stun guns, fair enough. But I think all the weapons used in this story would actually kill people, apart from maybe K9's laser. But that's about it. So yeah, I would sack those guards on the spot for murder. Not necessary murder, an unnecessary murder. Good God. Yeah, this is the problem. And don't get me started on the villains. Okay, they're not terrible villains, but they're not that great either. The Vardans are basically tinfoil. Tinfoil. They give the Easter egg a little bit early. They're kind of flapping around all the tinfoil stuff, but when we actually see them, it's laughable. They're laughable. And when they do materialise, they're just humans or humanoids. Nothing really that interesting. I mean, some cool uniforms. The actors do a good job, but they do sound annoying in some places. But, ayo. And then we get the Sontarans. Whilst the design of the Sontaran uniforms looks pretty good, when the leader takes off the helmet, it looks a bit awkward. Yeah, I know some Sontarans aren't the nicest looking creatures and they're supposed to resemble the Potato Head, but it just looks a bit awkward compared to the two Kevin Lindsay played back in 73 and 74 and 75. Back in the Time War and the Sontaran Experiment. So, yeah, and the guy that they got in for store, I've heard on documentaries that they were really praising the guy. They really praised the guy and they're like, oh, he's really great. But for me, I don't really like the actor playing Storr. He's not very great. I mean, props to him for working underneath that mask and all the prosthetics, or however you say that word. But I mean, it does okay, but I don't think he does that great. He's okay, but he's not that great. I'm not going to praise the living daylights out of him like the people in the documentary did. He's not that great, and his character is he's probably the most angriest Sontaran on screen. He's always shouting. He's always getting angry. He's always shoving Castellan or another Sontaran to the side, or the Doctor. He's always impatient. He's always angry. Calm down, dude. At least have a moment. At least have one bit where you're celebrating your victory. Like, I mean, they do gloat, but have a celebrate at least. Do Sontaran celebrate? I don't think so. But my goodness, lighten up. And also, on his around his eyes and around the mouth, there's some black bits for some reason. Maybe that was due to wearing the helmet. Maybe he had to wear the mask and the helmet underneath, because you do see when we get shots of the helmets with the eyes that there is a bit of flesh underneath. So I don't know if they had to wear that in that black paint went onto his eyes. He also puts his helmet back on and then takes it off again during part 6. I don't know why, but he decided to take it off, then later put it back on, and then take it off again. Yay. So yeah, I think this guy is probably my least favourite Sontaran. Even though the two Doctors the actors are too tall for that uniforms, and their masks also don't look that very good. I think the best Sontaran masks that they've had for the classic series was the Time Warriors, and that was the first ones. Sontaran Experiments also looked pretty good for the character. And the uniforms also looking pretty good. The black uniforms. But the ones we just get in this story is just they're not very good, and they're a bit annoying and shouting grumpy. I mean, yeah, Sontarans are supposed to be nasty, brutish, and short. With that latter bit, the two Doctors gets completely wrong. But I think they just go over the top with this time round. It's a great twist to see them back, but it's not handled that well following that. Much better. The way he gets axed off is pretty good, and they do build up to it. However, once we do get to that bit, it is done quickly. So, yeah, that's just the thing. Lots of build up, and there's even a build up to how it will happen, but when it actually does happen, it's over really quickly. Again, and yeah, part 6 also has lots of running around the TARDIS and in some Victorian old hospital, I think it was, they filmed in. An old Victorian hospital, all the corridors and the rooms there, for the most parts. So it can get a bit boring after a while, especially when they do the joke about how the deja vu joke over and over. I mean, there's at least they go back to that unloading bay place at least 3, maybe even 4 times. So many deja vus. I think the way it works, it might have worked 3 times, but after that it just got tired. No, it got tiring by the 3rd time, and it got even more tiring after that. It was a nice joke for the joke, but it went on too much and too long and was just overused. So yeah, lots of people probably aren't a fan of this story. Aren't fans, I should say, due to it being pretty slow and boring. And I can understand why, because it is very slow and boring. But I do like the plot, I do like the story. It's just that the pacing is so long. I can see why it took 4 parts. I think one way to describe it, that one of the story makers, show makers said, was that they were splitting into a 4 and a 2-part story. First 4 parts and then a 2 parts because people weren't keen on 6s. And the same would be done the next season with Armageddon Factor. It's just that it's so slow, so dull in quite a few places. It's got quite a few interesting stuff and some interesting characters, like some of the wilderness people, some of the other Time Lords. It's got some pretty good stuff, and the new Brewster is actually really good. And we got Milton Johns, I believe it is, back as again as the Castellan this time. Previously having played Bennick in Enemy of the World and Crayford in the Android Invasion, and he's really great here as well. He's sucking up to the Doctor or the Vardens or the Sontarans, whoever's in charge, so that he can have his own power. He can have to be really considered really great, a great guy, powerful guy, yet not quite wanting the position of president, as he says, just yet, as it's quite dangerous. But he would like to get it at some point, as I believe he implies during part 3 or part 4, that he doesn't want the presidency yet, but would like it in the future. So, yeah, he's actually a pretty decent character. He's funny to watch on screen, and John does another great performance. So, and on the whole, The Invasion of Time, it's a good story. It's just that it has quite a few issues, a couple of problems, quite a few nitpicks, and it's slow and boring in quite a few places. Especially during the middle of the story, or around the middle of the first quarter, during parts 2, 3, bit of 4, and parts of 5 and 6. I mean, 1 also has some of this. It feels like it's doing all. 1 has actually got lots of scenes that kind of disjointed together, and there's also this one bit where you see 2 Time Lords talking for about a minute or 2 about absolutely nothing until the presidential ceremony starts. I do love Tom Baker's performance in this story, though, because he is, when he's pretending to basically be a villain-esque character, when the Doctor seems to be wanting the presidency, he seems to be villain-esque, and he's a bit rude and aggressive and power-mad, but it's all turned out to be an act, and Baker does a great performance throughout. Louise Jameson also gives a great performance in her final appearance as a regular. Actually, no, this is her final on-screen appearance. Excluding Dimensions in Time, I believe. Yeah, besides that, she does a great performance, and this is the last appearance of K9 Mark 1, although I'm not sure which one appears in Dimensions in Time. That could be 1, 2, or 3. And Leeson also does a great job in what he has with K9. And there is, throughout this series, K9 has had some tiny shows of emotions, like, woo, hee hee, a couple of happy emotional moments in Sunmakers in Underworld. In this time round, he has the funny line where he declares the TARDIS to be a very stupid machine when it won't tell him where the Doctor is. That was a funny bit. K9 can be unintentionally funny at times, and he's proven to be really great here as well. And like I said, I like the guy playing Barusa. I thought he was great. Milton John, the guy playing Andrew, is also really likeable and really good. And some of the other performers are pretty good. The Vardens, I believe, try, but they're not amazing villains. As for the Sontarans, I don't really like the actors of them as well as they try with their characters. On the whole, Invasion of Time, good but dull, slow, boring in places. and really needed to pick up the pace and get there faster than it needed to, and stop meandering in places, especially in the last episode when they're just doing deja vu all the time, and nearly all the time. Just get on with it. So I'm going to give The Invasion of Time a 7 out of 10. I was conflicted to give it an 8 because I did enjoy it, but because of all the problems I've just mentioned, it couldn't quite get to that level, so I decided to stick with my pre-rewatch score of 7 out of 10. But I still like it. I think it's a good story. It's a good way to end the season, a season that's been pretty much troubled since once K9 got introduced. Nothing due to K9, it's just that after Invisible Enemy, the stories have been going downhill until we got to here. Thank God. Because if this story had been worse than a 5 out of 10 or lower, as I mentioned at the end of the Underworld review, then this series would have crashed and burned. Besides the first 2 stories, of course. But nope, we're saved. This season has an equal amount of good stories as it does an equal amount of bad stories. Or not that great stories, anyway. So yeah, that's season 15 done and dusted, and that was a difficult one to get through. I mean, it wasn't as slow or as long as some of the other seasons, but my goodness, that was a difficult one to get through. But anyway, thankfully we can move on to a new season, something a little bit different this time round, where the Doctor and a new model of K9 Mark II can be introduced. And that just reminds me, I didn't talk about the Leela and Andred stuff that much. Leela leaves because she's fallen in love with Andred. But they didn't really have that much interaction. They had a few scenes, mostly in part 1, but also a bit in part 3 and a bit in part 6, where they were like good friends, I suppose, maybe. But we didn't really see the romance blossom. So they've done a Susan again, except this time we don't see the romance blossom. Why is it that outside of companions sharing the TARDIS, like Ben and Polly or Ian and Barbara, but when is it when the TARDIS companions leave in the classic series due to romance? The romance is not developed, apart from maybe Susan and David's. Why is it that whenever they go to be with someone who hasn't been travelled with in the TARDIS, why is it always done badly? I mean, okay, no, Joe's and Cliff's was actually pretty good, actually. Okay, besides that, and besides Susan and Joe, so it seems to be 50-50 at the moment. Okay, but why is it sometimes handled so badly and sometimes handled brilliantly? I don't know. I really don't know. Like I said, Susan's one was done well, and Joe's one was done well as well, but Leela and also Vicky was the other one that had the problem. Vicky and Leela, they've had the problems. I don't know if anybody else leaves due to romance in the classic series. No, I think that's about it. So it's about 50-50. And Louise Jameson wanted the heroic death character. I'm sure Big Finish will probably get around to that at some point in your maybe during the Time War audios if they haven't already, or maybe if there's a story in the future about the events of the Time Wars and they bring it up. But yeah, it's not the best way for her to go out. I mean, she does get to go and appear in those Gallifrey audios, as I mentioned, and help out on Gallifrey with Romana when she gets back from whatever she did in at the end of Warrior's Gate. But yeah, but for this story, it didn't quite make sense. K9 even to be with her did make sense though. Okay, I just wanted to get that out of the way before I forgot about it, because I said I had to mention it again. Okay, so that's the end of my review of The Invasion of Time. Next time, Season 16, Story 1, The Ribos Operation, after the Season 15 ranking, of course. But as I was saying before, I remembered I had to talk about the lead a bit again. We'll be starting off something a bit more fresh, as we're going to be getting a new companion, Romana, this time first incarnation, played by Mary Tam, and we're going to be looking for the Key to Time as part of a season-long story arc. Not quite the same way as Trial of a Time Lord, but something more akin to maybe the new series. So, anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time for the Season 15 ranking, then the Rybot operation. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. And don't get me started on the Sontarr. I mean, props to him for working underneath all that, all underneath the mask and the prosthetics. Oh. But I still like it. Just, I was about to say just about, but no, that's different. K9 leaving to be with her made sense. Okay, K9 leaving for her